Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's webinar. My name is Leah Springstead. I'm with the Capital Chamber Foundation. And doing the presentation today will be Emma and Brianna of Pursuit Lending.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation on the recovery programs that are available for small businesses today. As Leah mentioned, my name is Emma Rose Cantor, and I am from Pursuit Lending. I'm joined by my colleague Brianne, who will help us answer questions, as well as Leah from the Capital Region Chamber of Commerce. So welcome, everyone. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a question and answer section. If you have questions throughout the presentation, you can drop them in right there and we will get them answered as we go. But without further ado, we're gonna jump right in. First things first, who is Pursuit? Who are we? So at Pursuit, our mission is simple, and that's to provide businesses with affordable loans and resources so that they can reach higher, transform, and grow. So you might know us by our former name, New York Business Development Corporation. We are a community-focused lender where businesses can access more than 15 loan programs that provide a wide range of financing, everything from small loans of just $10,000 all the way up to serious loans of $5.5 million, all with affordable rates and terms. So to give you a bit of context, last year alone, Pursuit provided more than $250 million in financing through 520 business loans, creating more than 2,900 jobs across our region, which covers New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. And in addition, we've provided more than 11,000 COVID-19 relief loans. And so today we're really in our wheelhouse talking about the programs that you all can access as small businesses during these, unprecedented times. So, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, there are a plethora of pandemic relief programs that you can access. If you might be eligible for payment relief from the SBA. So for certain holders of 7A, 504 loans, or microloans, the SBA will actually pay down principal, interest, and fees for you. So your lender can provide you more information on that, but definitely encourage everyone to look into that, see if they qualify. Definitely keep an ear open for local programs, industry-specific support. There are new programs that are starting pretty much every day still. But today, what we're going to focus our presentation on now is two key programs in New York State. One is the New York Forward Loan Fund, and the other is the New York State Recovery Grant Program. So, overview of what these two programs are and how they are different. So the New York Forward Loan Fund is, as its name suggests, a loan. So it provides loans of up to $100,000 to eligible businesses. On the other hand, the New York State Recovery Grant Program, as its name suggests, provides grants to small businesses. So loans you have to pay back, grants are yours to keep. And they're a little bit smaller in scale, so up to $50,000 for the New York State Recovery Grant Program. Slightly different eligibility criteria here. So New York Forward is open to small businesses as well as nonprofits and landlords who earn passive income. The New York State Recovery Grant Program is open only to small businesses. So you have to be a for-profit entity and you have to earn money from sales. For the New York Forward Loan Fund, there are some restrictions around what other government assistance you can have received. So for the New York Forward Loan, it's less than $500,000 in PPP and less than $150,000 in EIDL in order to qualify for the New York Forward Loan Fund. On the grant side, it's less than $100,000 in PPP loans. There are no requirements around EIDL, but businesses cannot have received any restaurant revitalization grant funding. These requirements are in place primarily so that this money gets to all of the businesses who haven't been able to access significant funding from these other programs. And then one other key difference is that on the New York Forward Loan side, Pursuit and other community lenders like us approve and underwrite applications. So we are the deciding factor. On the New York State Recovery Grant side, Pursuit and organizations like the Capital Region Chamber of Commerce just help businesses apply. So we don't make any decisions about eligibility or approvals or anything like that. We are here to help you streamline the process, get your applications in, and then the New York State government makes the final eligibility decisions there. So for the rest of the presentation, we'll do a deep dive into each of these programs, New York Forward Loan Fund and the New York State Recovery Grant Program. If you have questions at any point throughout, you can drop them into the question and answer session. All right, New York Forward Loan Fund. So as I mentioned, this provides loans of up to $100,000 to support small businesses, nonprofits, and small landlords as they navigate, the COVID economic environment. These are 5-year term loans with rates fixed at 3%. So really, favorable terms here. In addition, the loan is structured so that you're only required to pay interest for the first 12 months. As I said, there are some restrictions around who's eligible here. As a business, you cannot have received more than $150,000 in EIDL from the SBA or more than $500,000 in Paycheck Protection Program loans, and that's regardless of forgiveness status. So if you haven't received significant financing of more than $150,000 from EIDL or more than $500,000 from the Paycheck Protection Program, if you think you're interested in a low interest 5-year loan through New York State, you can apply through this website right here, newyorkloanfund.com, or you can reach out directly to Pursuit. We're still, developing applications here, and so if you have questions about whether you might apply, definitely encourage you to learn some more there.
Emma, we have a question on New York Forward. Are there any restrictions on how many New York Forward loans a business can receive?
That is a great question, and I actually am not sure the answer. The state had gone back and forth on the rules there, but if we have your name, whoever asked that question, we can follow up afterwards with an answer. I just don't want to tell you the wrong thing here.
Great, thanks.
Great. Any other questions on the New York Forward Loan Fund? All right, hearing none, we'll keep moving. So now moving on to the other program that we're going to be talking about in this webinar, and that's the New York State Recovery Grant Program. So the requirements here are a little bit trickier. These are grants of up to $50,000 for small businesses that have faced economic hardship during the pandemic. And priority here is going to be given to socially and economically disadvantaged business owners. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a few moments, but what I want to underscore here is that we are not, or the state is not looking at ability to repay anything because this is a grant. These are funds that you'll get to keep. And so as a result, they have constructed a sort of complicated set of eligibility requirements for the businesses that do qualify for this grant. There's no underwriting, but there is a sort of eligibility check here. So what are those eligibility requirements? The first is that a business has to have made between $25,000 and $500,000 in annual revenue in either 2019 or 2020. So you can qualify using either year. Then when we compare 2019 to 2020 revenue, the state is looking to see that there was a 25% loss in revenue from 19 to 20 based on your tax returns. In addition, businesses need to have reported a net profit in 2019. So you had to have a net operating profit of at least $1. You can't have reported a loss in 2019. Unfortunately, if you did report a loss in 19, you wouldn't be eligible for this grant program. Businesses need to have fewer than 100 employees, be founded on or before March 1st, 2019. They need to be organized and operating in New York State, and they can't have any open tax judgments. some of these other requirements that we talked about before. Can't have Paycheck Protection Program loans of $100,000 or more. So eligible businesses can have $100,000 or less in PPP. And businesses can't have received any restaurant revitalization grant funding. Again, nonprofits, landlords are not eligible for the New York State Recovery Grant Program, while they are eligible for the loan. Other ineligible businesses here are government-owned entities, elected officials' offices, and political or lobbying groups. So that's the sort of overview of the eligibility criteria for the grant program, and I'll give a little bit more detail on each of those key requirements now. So the first is our annual revenue requirements. So an eligible business, as I said, must have between $25,000 and $500,000 in gross receipts in either 2019 or 2020. Business can qualify using either tax year. And 2020 gross receipts must be at least 25% less than 2019 gross receipts. So I'll give you some examples to sort of put a point on this here. So this first business, we have $100,000 in 19 receipts, $75,000 in 2020 receipts. So this business had, that required 25% loss in revenue, and they are in fact eligible for the grant program. This second business here had $520,000 in 2019 and $260,000 in 2020. So while this first grant was, well over the $500,000 threshold, they qualify for this requirement using their 2020 receipts. And they had a significant loss year over year. They, in fact, lost 50% of their revenue from 19 to 2020. And so this business also is eligible according to both of these annual revenue requirements. This third business had $450,000 in 19 receipts, so that puts them in the eligibility range. But in 2020, they had more than $500,000. They had $600,000. And so while they do qualify for 2019 receipts, they didn't show a significant enough loss in 2020. And so, in fact, they made more money from 19 to 20, and so this business would not be eligible for the program. This fourth business here, $100,000 in 19, $90,000 in 2020. They had eligible revenue on both years, but they didn't experience a significant enough loss. They had a minor loss, a 10% loss, but it didn't meet that second bullet here of a 25% threshold. So this business would not be eligible to apply. And then finally, this last business, $800,000 in 2019, $600,000 in 2020. They did experience a 25% loss in revenue, but neither year's revenue is in that eligible range of $25,000 to $500,000. So unfortunately, this last business also is not eligible for the program. Any questions on the annual revenue requirements that have come in so far?
No questions yet, Emma.
Great. Okay, well then this was our annual revenue requirements. Next, we're going to talk about net profit requirements. So as I mentioned, eligible businesses have to have reported an operating profit of at least $1 on their 2019 tax return. So you can't have broken even in 2019. You can't have reported a loss in 2019. You have to have reported a positive net income. Now, businesses don't need to have made a profit in 2020. In fact, the state understands that most businesses didn't in 2020, and they're not looking at change in year over year profit. They're just looking at one number on your 2019 taxes. Okay, other grant awards. So as we've said, businesses are not eligible if they receive more than $100,000 in Paycheck Protection Program loans, and that's regardless of forgiveness and across both rounds. Businesses also are not eligible if they received any restaurant revitalization grant funding. But those are really the only restrictions here. So businesses who meet all the other eligibility requirements will still be eligible, even if they've received, grant advance for EIDL, shuttered venue operators grant, or any of the government loan programs like the New York Forward loan that we just spoke about, or the EIDL loan. So you just have to really be careful of PPP, and if you're a restaurant revitalization grant. So how are grants calculated here? Well, they're gonna take a look at your 2019 gross receipts. And if those gross receipts, if that annual revenue was between $25,000 and $50,000 in 19, then you'll get a flat grant award of $5,000. If your gross receipts were between $50,000 and $100,000, you'll get a flat grant award of $10,000. And if your gross receipts were more than $100,000, you'll get 10% of those gross receipts up to $50,000. So if you made $200,000 in revenue in 19, you'll get a grant of $20,000. Made $300,000 in 19, you'll get a grant of $30,000. And that sliding scale goes all the way up to the maximum grant of $50,000. Before we dig into required documents, any other questions come in?
We have a couple questions, Emma. So first one being, are the grants on a first come, first serve basis?
It's a great question. I think, in fact, this very next slide talks a little bit about the prioritization of applications. So whoever asked this question, great mind reading that this was coming up. So the Recovery Grant Program is not a first come, first served grant. So unlike that kind of rush that we saw with PPP and other grant programs, you don't need to feel like you need to hop off this call and immediately submit your application. Instead, the state has said that they are evaluating all of the applicants that, apply, and then prioritizing within that group based on a whole host of factors. So business type, geography, industry, all sorts of things might impact where you are in the queue of prioritized applications. They haven't been public about exactly what those criteria are going to be, but they've told us that priority will be given to socially and economically disadvantaged business owners, which include but are not limited to minority and women-owned businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned businesses, and those located in economically distressed communities. And so you can see a map here of what those communities are. If you're curious whether you fall into one of these priority groups, happy to have a one-on-one conversation about that. I can talk about how to get in touch with us at the end. But they really are encouraging everyone who meets the eligibility criteria to go ahead and submit that application, because you never know, they might get to your spot in the queue, and so it's worth having an application in, even if you're not in one of the priority groups.
Great, thank you. And one more question. Is there a deadline to apply for this or an end date for the program at this time?
It's a great question. The state has not published an end date for the program yet. They've said it could be coming as late as even the end of this month. So we definitely encourage anyone who's interested not to wait around before applying. If you're ready to go, you should definitely submit your application. But they haven't as of yet said specifically what the end date will be.
Great, thanks. That's all the questions we have for right now.
Great. So how to apply? Well, you're going to need 4 required documents. So the application itself is sort of a 2-part application. You'll fill out an eligibility form on the state's website. It's powered by a company called Lendistry, so you might see that name. And you'll fill out that eligibility form. You'll receive login credentials to get into the document portal, and you'll be asked to upload 4 required documents. The first is an application certification, which is a document specific to this program that you'll download, initial all of the certifications that you are indeed eligible for the program, and then you'll sign and date at the bottom. You'll need your 2019 business tax returns, however you file your business taxes, 1120, 1120S, 1065, Schedule K, or 1040, Schedule C, however you file. You'll also need your 2020 business tax returns. So we know that some businesses have filed an extension on their 2020 taxes and haven't yet filed with the IRS. The state has told us that you will need to file those 2020 taxes before you can apply for this grant program. So if you want to apply, definitely recommend doing first your taxes and then going ahead and applying to the grant program. The last required document for application is your government issued ID. And so once you have those 4 documents in, once you've submitted your eligibility form, you are good to go. And then once you're approved, if you do get approved, they'll ask that you submit a couple more sort of supporting documents with your application. One is a schedule of ownership, basically stating the names and contact information for all of the significant owners of your company. If you're an employer firm, the state will ask for your most recent New York State 45 document, which discloses how many employees you have and the withholdings there. You'll need to submit proof of business location and current operation. On the state's website, there's a whole list of documents that meet this requirement. It's like a lease, a mortgage, a whole bunch of things. It's a very flexible requirement. And again, you'll only need to do this if you're approved. Similarly, you'll need to provide proof of business organization, and then finally a W-9 and your bank account information so that the state can actually disperse those grants to you. Now, the good news is that after you submit your eligibility form, you have 14 days to upload your documents. So if you're ready to submit the eligibility form, you can go on the state's website, fill that out today, and then work on gathering those documents. You will need these top 4, the certification, both years of tax returns, and the government ID in order to have a complete application. And the others you can leave blank until you are approved, hopefully. Any other questions come in about that?
No other questions that I can see, Emma.
Great. Well then, your next steps here is to gather up that required paperwork. And as I said, if you haven't already, file those 2020 taxes. If you're ready to go, you can apply directly through the New York State portal, which we've linked here and we'll share after this presentation. And if you're not sure exactly where to start, you can contact Leah or Pursuit. Leah, anything I forgot to add, anything you want to make sure our audience knows about?
If you're sharing your screen, would you be able to show them the grant portal website?
Sure. Yes, while I am doing that, we can pause for more questions. No more questions have come in.
Nope, no more questions for right now, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to submit them through the questions tab.
I can switch over now to our New York State Recovery Grant Program here. So this is what the website looks like. Let's see if it loads for everyone.
Yes, we can see it, Emma.
Great. So this is what the New York State website looks like. The URL is newyorksmallbusinessrecovery.com. And you have, you know, the information about the grant program, all the things that we just talked about, how your grant will be calculated, what the eligibility requirements are. If you keep scrolling down, you'll see an application guide in all different languages. At the top, there's this translate button. So you can translate it into your preferred language as needed. You can see the application certification, that document that you'll have to download and initial and sign. These are all of the required documents that we just talked through. There's an FAQ page, and then way down at the bottom, there's this begin application button, and that will take you to the application itself, which we won't go through today. Anything else I can answer?
There are a couple more questions that have come in, Emma.
Great.
So let me go through these. So if someone's already applied for the grant and they haven't heard back yet, is there someone that they could contact to see the status of their application?
It's a great question. So don't be worried if you have applied and you haven't heard back yet. The state is, because they're evaluating all of these different factors that we mentioned, the application process itself is slow. And so they warned us, not to be waiting with bated breath to hear back. And so don't feel like it's a bad sign if you haven't heard back yet. That's my first thing. But there is a hotline that you can call if you do have a question. And I can pull up that hotline number. I believe is at the top or somewhere on the web page. We can find it for you. And oh, here we go. Here, I'll just show my screen here. So our hotline number for the state is this call center number right here. So that's 877-721-0097. And so you should be ready to have your application number, which you'll be given if you've already applied, your business name, your EIN, any of the sort of information that would be helpful to help the state locate your application. And they'll be able to tell you more. I have a feeling it's just that they're working their way through the queue of applications, but this is a place you can find.
Great. If you are refused a grant, are you able to reapply for the program?
It's a good question. It sort of depends why you were declined. If you were declined because you were not eligible, you didn't meet the eligibility criteria you didn't make a profit in 2019 or you didn't have a significant enough loss, then it would not make sense to resubmit because none of the circumstances have changed. I guess I'd want to know a little bit more information. That might be a good conversation for a one-on-one.
Great. And Emma, I know you said that it kind of takes a long time for the state to work through these processes. Is there any estimate on how long it has been taking to process and provide determinations?
It's so tough. So the state hasn't given us any guidance along these lines. We know that a handful of applications have been approved so far. We have no sense of the scale of, how quickly they're moving through these applications or what is happening or an estimated time. So it's one of those, unfortunately, I wish I had a better answer there.
No problem. One more question on the grant, and then we have a New York Forward question. Do you have to spend the grant in a certain way or for certain expenses?
It's a great question. So the state guidance has a list of the eligible things that you can spend this grant on. Now, the tricky part here is that no one is ever going to follow up and ask you for receipts on how you spent this grant money. It's designed to serve expenses that you've already incurred or paid. And so the guidance that the state gives is it should be expenses that were incurred or paid between March 2020 and April 2021. So basically like a few months ago and then the year before that, any expenses that you had in that time. And it could be for pretty much any business expense you have. It can be, payroll, equipment, machinery, anything you did to outfit your business for COVID, following health and safety protocols. It's a broad list. Now, you should expect to have to pick one of those things on the application itself. But as I said, there's no strict documentation requirement around proving that you actually spent your money in that way. And so I wouldn't worry too much about that. As I'm sure everyone on this call knows, working capital is working capital. And so what it goes towards, a past expense that you've already paid or a future one, is sort of semantics.
Great. And then for New York Forward, what is the timeline like from application to funding for that loan?
It's a good question. There have been, more recently, it's taken longer as the state works on getting new funding streams for New York Forward. Historically, it has been, you know, as quick as sometimes a week. But these days it is taking a little bit longer. We're keeping a close eye on the funding that is available. And so I definitely, if you're interested, encourage you to reach out and, you know, apply. I can put back up our contact information here. And definitely encourage you to get in touch.
Thanks, Emma. That's all the questions we have for today.
Great. Well, then I'll just put back up our contact information here and encourage everyone to, you know, get in touch. We really are here to be helpful to you. As I said, we're not, especially on the grant side, we're not the deciding factor. And so it's our job to be your advocate and your helper as you navigate what can sometimes be a tricky state website. And so definitely encourage you all to reach out if you can think of any way that we can be useful. So you have Leah's contact information here. You have Pursuit's contact information. We've set up a special inbox for grant specific questions. That's granthelp@pursuitlending.com. And so we'll send out all of this in our follow-up to today's session, but thank you all for joining.